Now, for some reason during middle school, I really wished to get a perm. So I did, and the result came out rather horribly, to put it most mildly. Instead of my hair looking like this, it came out looking like this. So when I walked into the classroom the next morning for the attendance taking session before the first period began, there was a huge silence with everyone just staring at the atrocity that was my hair. And the initial silence, without a doubt, were all due to my friends trying to think of some clever joke to let out in regards to my ridiculous hair, which they did do soon enough. And you know, those are all good fun memories, as after all, a bad haircut is something that can be very well categorized into a subject matter that can be joked around with. We all have those memories of joking around with our friends, commenting on the funny looking jacket which they bought, or their clunky new shoes. However, there's a time and a place for joking around, as well as understanding that there are certain subject matters in which we can never ever joke around with. Let's say the individual's one and only parents died from a large house fire. Then your quote-unquote friend comes over to you the next day that makes a quote-unquote joke of something the lines of, "Man, if your parents were not so damn fat, they would have gotten out of the house in time." Now, when you hear this the day after you saw the burned corpses of your one and only parents, I believe we can all agree that it would absolutely obliterate this quote-unquote friend into pieces, no matter the consequences. However, this type of abominable mockery is exactly what one of the biggest television channels have done to the tsunami and the subsequent nuclear plant disaster victims of Japan's Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that occurred in the year 2011. And the fact that this was not an act committed by one rare psycho staff working for the broadcasting channel, but something that was reviewed and laughed around with multiple times by the staffs of the broadcasting channel before it was aired, just makes you question the degree of banality of evil that silently but surely permeates throughout the organizational institutions in Japan and in the bigger picture, the Japanese society. And the punishment which the staffs of the television channel received was so mild that it makes you question whether the people, especially the immoral psychopath who was most responsible for this case, even felt a tiny bit guilty for what he has done. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into the time when the Japanese television channel made an extreme public mockery out of the tsunami and earthquake victims who have managed to survive and were working desperately to put their lives back together, and exactly how this broadcasting quote-unquote prank brought further irrevocable state of despair and hopelessness to the already more than devastated victims who have lost all of their loved ones but were attempting to fight their way back to life. And furthermore, we'll provide a macro analysis of how immoral psychopaths, such as the main culprit who caused this broadcasting disaster, runs at the very foundation of many organizational settings in Japan, and if left largely unmeditated as to how they are now, will come to gradually but surely ruin the nation of Japan as a whole, as witnessed throughout history. This video is brought to you by our book. Yes, with our channel still being a small channel with less than 50 videos uploaded yet, we are still at a point where we have to sponsor ourselves. Emil Cioran, an existentialist Romanian philosopher, once said, "Write books only if you're going to say in them the things you'd never dare to confide to anyone." And in essence, that is exactly what our book is all about. We live in a world where two things hinder us mainly in the journey towards procuring the right knowledge in regards to a certain subject matter. The first obstacle is the inundated, albeit most of them low quality, information accessible in today's internet era, which paradoxically leads people to give up on the process of absorbing all the necessary information required and thus resort to the terse, shallow answers provided on online platforms such as Reddit and YouTube. This is certainly the case, especially in the process of procuring knowledge in regards to Japan. The second obstacle in our path to procuring the right knowledge, especially when it comes to understanding matters regarding Japan, is the fact that we live in a world dominated by political correctness. This means that the actual experts who write in-depth papers and literature on Japanese psychology nonetheless usually have a hard time directly expressing the harsh, real truth of the matter in order to keep their political correctness levels in check as required by academia. Our book overcomes both of these obstacles. Although an ebook, I really do not like calling it an ebook, as the connotations that has been established with most ebooks of today generally has been a one where these quote-unquote digital nomads create a 5 to 10 page PDF and dare use the word book to actually describe them. So despite the ebook format, our book will be by far the longest book you have ever read in Japanese psychology, based on my decade plus years of experience of studying and working in Japan among the Japanese people, while at the same time combining countless academic literature written in Japanese psychology to substantiate my claims. So if you're interested in finally understanding the Japanese collective psychology, such as in why the people of a nation who places utmost value on respecting others and not encroaching upon their personal space, with the degree probably being the most extreme in the entire world, also be one of the biggest and most prolific producer and consumer of the largest variety of pornography, which in essence is basically identical in nature, as poking a hole to the wall and watch other individuals perform the most private intimate of acts, you have to purchase our book. And we can guarantee that our book will be the single best investment that you can make for your Japan-oriented goal, whether it be you want to come to Japan and work among the Japanese people, or form a meaningful relationship with an individual from Japan. So please check out our book from the link in the description if you're interested, and let us get back to the video. Before we get into the analysis of this broadcasting calamity, let us first go over step by step of the events that ultimately culminated to one of the most hurtful mockeries ever aired on live Japanese television. This happened in Japan's Tokai TV network in one of their morning TV shows called The Pecan Show. The staff who was most responsible for this broadcasting calamity was the CG producer of the show. Now, it was common knowledge and practice in Japan among the broadcasting industry-related personnels in that they often like to joke around with funny images and wordplays during the pre-live testing rehearsal phases. Their stated reason for doing this was to help one another endure the hours and hours of boring and arduous prep work that had to be mandatorily done before each live show by lightening up the atmosphere through jokes and humor. Now, this in and of itself is perfectly fine and reasonable. I mean, many of us know just how hard it is to sit down for 10 plus hours and work straight with barely any type of rest. But the problem here was that the CG producer of the show came up with the most contemptible and inhumane joke imaginable to quote-unquote lighten up the work atmosphere. To elaborate, many of us know that on March 11, 2011, Japan experienced the strongest earthquake in its recorded history. This earthquake then triggered tsunami waves that went beyond the heights of 130 feet, leading to the death of almost 230,000 innocent Japanese civilians, if counting the bodies that went missing along with the official death toll. Imagine yourself living your day-to-day life, texting your mother about what to eat for dinner, then to experience the ground beneath you literally split apart in half from the largest earthquake in recorded history, then be given a mere 8 to 10 minute warning in regards to the fact that one of the largest tsunamis in recorded history will also shortly arrive and run over everything that you have built upon your entire life, as well as your one and only loved ones. Thankfully, you evacuated fast enough and have survived from the tsunami. However, when you text your mother, there's no response, and the response never did arrive, with the final text with your mother in this lifetime stopping at the discussion of what to eat for dinner. The rescue team arrives from Tokyo a few days later, then in 2 weeks they find the body of your mother under the rubbles. You cannot believe what has happened in front of your eyes in the mere span of those last tens of hours, and pinch yourself on the arm every day, desperately begging to the sky to have all of this just be one bad nightmare. But no matter how many times you repeat the process, you do not seem to wake up from the nightmare, and you cry every night, wishing that you could have at least texted your mother that you loved her and would like to thank her for all that she has done for you as your final text, rather than complaining to her about how she never cooks any dishes with any meat inside it. Now, such is, without any exaggeration, no, in fact I believe this is the biggest understatement of a story compared to the actual degree of ineffable sorrow and pain felt by the tsunami victims, is quite literally what happened to the innocent individuals who are living their day-to-day lives in the Tohoku region of Japan, such as Fukushima, Iwate, and Miyagi. Again, not some distant virtual beings living in some another dimension anime land. Human beings just like you and I. So needless to say, you simply do not make fun of and make a complete mockery out of the earthquake and tsunami victims of the Tohoku region, period. And the ones who do, we dare say have to be separated from the society at large, not due to their immorality, but their amorality, in their complete incapacity for human emotions, and the dangers in which such individuals have done onto humanity if consistently given multiple chances, time and time again in the history of humanity. And with certain subject matter such as the one that has involved the tragic death of tens of thousands of innocent people, as in the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami of 2011, it does not matter how quote-unquote mild the troll thinks his joke is. You know what these people all do. They always have done seriously offending the other person, then when the other person confronts them, they all respond to the offended person with the most emotionless blank face, saying, "It's just a joke bro, why so serious?" Now, the Tohoku region of Japan has always been famous for its rice production, with many residents of the area having their occupation as farmers to provide a living for themselves and for their families. And now, this is where the broadcasting quote-unquote prank comes into play. on August 4th, 2011, the Tokai television network of Japan was conducting its daily morning show, which was the Pecan Show. And during the morning show, they had a brief segment where they were conducting a telesales for Japanese udon noodles, and some of the purchasers of the udon noodles were to be given a prize of 10 kg of rice produced in Japan's Iwate Prefecture. Now, although the Iwate Prefecture is technically not the prefecture where the nuclear plant meltdown occurred, it is still somewhat close to the Fukushima Prefecture where the nuclear plant was located at. And the period of the show aired being August 2011, which was only a few months after the devastating tsunami and earthquake, the people in Japan were all in a state of fear and anxiety in regards to just how much of the nuclear plant meltdown and the subsequent leakage of radioactive material was to have an impact on the farm products produced in the region and the regions nearby. But then, for some reason, the CG producer of the show thought that it would be extremely funny to name the winners of the rice prize to quote Mr. Seshum, and to label all rice as either suspicious rice or contaminated rice. As many of you are already aware, cesium-137 is a radioactive material that caused huge concerns in Japan as large amounts of cesium was leaked from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, subsequently being deposited and contaminating the soil of the region. And in all fairness, it was probably not a good idea to consume rice produced directly inside the Fukushima prefecture at that particular time, as in the month of November 2011, Japan did ban all rice from Fukushima produced in areas proximate to the power plant, as the samples that were tested did indeed show levels of radioactive contamination that went above the legal limits. So then, did the CG producer of the show believe himself to be this silent dark knight who wanted to warn the people of Japan in regards to the dangers of the rice from Fukushima? Highly unlikely. First, the rice that were being given out as prizes were not even from the Fukushima region. Technically speaking, the Iwate prefecture is not even tangent to the Fukushima prefecture, with the Miyagi prefecture existing between them. This does not mean that the Iwate prefecture was not hit hard by the earthquake and tsunami, by the way, as the epicenter of the earthquake was just as close to the Iwate prefecture as to the Fukushima prefecture, with the tsunami waves being just as large in magnitude. It's just that the Daiichi nuclear power plant happened to be located in the Fukushima prefecture. And when the Japanese government conducted extensive testing on rice products across Japan in order to check upon their radiation levels, the rice from the Iwate prefecture, unlike the rice produced in the Fukushima prefecture, passed all safety tests. Now, this does not, of course, mean that there is a 100% guarantee that all rice produced in the Iwate prefecture will be safe, and it is up to the consumer to consider the risks and make their purchasing decisions. And if a consumer does not feel inclined to purchase rice from the Iwate prefecture, then that consumer should not be criticized for their purchasing decisions. However, for one of the largest Japanese broadcasting channels to make a complete ridicule of the rice from regions that were hit most hard by the tsunami, such as Iwate, but were still located distant from the Fukushima power plant and thus passing all safety tests as suspicious rice and contaminated rice, and openly mock all winners of the rice prizes as quote-unquote Mr. Seshum or Mr. Radiation on live television when hundreds of thousands of ordinary Japanese citizens were watching is beyond unacceptable. But as emotion-driven beings that are human beings, the declaration of rice from Iwate, the one that has passed all safety tests, as suspicious and radiation-contaminated rice by one of the biggest TV channels in Japan, exacerbated the already heightened levels of fear held by the Japanese citizens and essentially eradicated any remaining levels of demand that were left for the rice produced in the Iwate prefecture. Imagine losing your loved ones in a tsunami and never being able to say goodbye to them and spending months at the heights of despair, but finally finding the courage to understand that your mother, if she was alive at this point, would tell you to get up and get your life back together. So you work back at the rice farm, the only thing that you have known how to do your entire life, only to find out that nobody in Japan wants to buy your rice anymore as a result of this quote-unquote prank from one of the biggest TV channels in Japan deriding your product and make an absolute mockery of all people who consume your products as a bunch of quote-unquote Mr. Radiations. Now, on the day when this was aired on Tokai TV, 20,000 individual complaints were made by many of the more than justifiably enraged people of Japan. And if the number of people who have actually picked up their phone to call or send an email to the TV network alone was 20,000 on a single day, we can safely estimate that viewers in the minimum range of hundreds of thousands, or perhaps even millions, were watching this morning show during the time it was aired. So the day after the show has been aired, the president of Tokai TV himself has came out and made a formal apology, and the TV channel created an hour-length special program of how this quote-unquote accident exactly came to occur. Now, the way in which the president of Tokai TV reacted to this, we actually respect. In a sincere tone, he apologizes, then once again apologizes to all of the viewers, and most of all, the farmers in the Iwate region who have been deeply hurt by this inhumane incident. However, the formal apology by the president of the broadcasting channel, although much necessary and taken with gratitude, is not what the Japanese people were looking for. The Japanese people wanted to hear a formal apology by the CG producer of the company. And in this hour-long special program, they did try to do just that, but to no avail. To elaborate, the CG producer of the Pecan show, although his face was hidden, came out to explain exactly why he did what he did. For any of you guys who can speak Japanese, I'll put the video of the interview in the link in the description. But I highly recommend you to not watch it while you're eating your meal, as the contents of the interview will just make your heart boil and want to throw up whatever you're eating at the time. Now, first of all, the CG producer never ever apologizes for what he has done. I even feel sorry for the interviewer as he tries to elicit an apologetical statement from the CG producer time and time again throughout the entire interview, but simply could not. The CG producer just continues to repeat again and again that he was just quote-unquote joking around with his co-workers and that he just put on the screen whatever came up in his mind at the particular moment. Like, that is all that he literally regurgitates again and again with just some simple paraphrasings is almost hypnotic due to his repetitive nature. I just put down whatever popped up in my mind at the time, no offense intended, while actually having the mind-blowing audacity to giggle while conducting the interview. Not a single statement of what I put down on the teleprompter screen was highly inappropriate and inhumane, or I'd like to apologize to the farmers in the Iwate region who are deeply hurt by my actions, or if given another chance, I'll learn from my mistakes and never commit a similar act again. I mean, this man is putting the quote-unquote "it's just a prank bro, why so serious" to a whole new Japanese level. Now, when I watched the interview of the CG producer, it literally gave me PTSD in regards to many of such parallel individuals whom I came across in my decade-plus years of studying and working in Japan. Now, when I say this, some may say, but I see all these Japanese people in the YouTube street interviews, and they seem to be the nicest people. But with all due respect, anybody, and I mean anybody, can appear pleasant and charming in a 5-minute street interview. Even Ted Bundy would very likely provide the most YouTube-worthy, charming guy of an interview if he was still alive today and people didn't know who he was. So when I talk about PTSD and discuss experiences of the sheer high proportions of these amoral, again not immoral but amoral beings such as the CG producer of the Pecan show during my time working in Japan,
you have no idea!
Many outsiders will have a hard time grasping this fact. I mean, look at these people. They look so pleasant and innocent, and I do guarantee you that most are indeed very nice people. But the ones who are not nice, and in fact are psychopath-like beings such as the CG producer, where do they show their real selves? Yes, at work, where people are enervated, cortisol runs through the roof, and thus when people begin to show their real selves. And I firmly believe that toxic amoral beings, such as the CG producer that deeply runs at the core of the Japanese organizational setting, if continued to be unmeditated, are the ones that will eventually come to ruin Japan. I mean, in the smaller setting, he did ruin the Pecan show, as the show was discontinued effectively the day after the broadcasting disaster, with the entire Japanese population boiling with anger. And of course, in the larger setting, he further ruined the already devastated lives of the unfortunate rice farmers of the Iwate prefecture who were desperately trying to get their life back together after the death of their loved ones and having everything that they had swept by the sea. And the single element that is most dangerous about such amoral individuals is just one word: conviction. The single common overarching trait that I've seen empirically from such amoral beings, as you can clearly see manifest from the case of the CG producer, is their absolute, unwavering conviction that there is not a single tiny bit wrong with their actions and the heinous ideas in which they espouse and spread. I mean, look at the CG producer. His voice does not show a single ounce of guilt.
特に何かしてやろう、何かあれしてやろう、こうしてやろうっていう気持ちは全くなかった。
And time again, he never ever apologizes, even when the entire nation is asking for an apology. This is the level of conviction that is only possible from beings who possess absolute amorality. This is as they do not even know what they're doing is immoral, as in the immoral beings at least know what they're doing is wrong, but still conduct it anyways. But such amoral beings are, in a sense, very, very different from the immoral individuals, in that the amoral ones quite literally do not even have the cognitive capacity and the internal moral compass to understand what they're doing is wrong. And in the case of this televised broadcast calamity, at least thanks to the national level of criticism, we get validation on a heartfelt judgment of the fact that the CG producer is clearly not right in the head, and we are not wrong for thinking this way. But imagine yourself in a close, one-on-one setting with such an individual in a work setting, seeing and inevitably having to talk to them for literally double-digit hours a day. And in this case, you're by yourself. No voice of reason and validation from other sane individuals who confirms your initial beliefs that your co-worker is not right in the head. Now, this is the most dangerous situation. The reason why such a setting, especially being exposed to it for prolonged periods of time, is so pernicious to the average individual is that these amoral beings are literally the best at, I really do not know how to put this the best way, just screwing with your head from the most fundamental level and gradually but surely mess up your internal moral compass that tells you what is right and what is wrong. You can actually experience the very experience on a YouTube channel. In our video where we criticize some of the degenerates in Japan who went out to purchase Buruma outfits that were already worn by the female minors in Japan who were far under the age of 18, I repeat, minors, and had their body stains on them, there was literally a guy who wrote a comment in his amoral mind creating a perfectly quote-unquote logical argument arguing how it is perfectly fine to purchase an unwashed Buruma already worn by an underage female, wear it and smell it, etc. if you can successfully persuade your female partner who's going to be wearing this that this is all fine. Like, what?
Bro, what are you talking about, man? Bro, I'm out, man.
I mean, I knew such people with these fetishes existed, thus the reason why these unwashed, already worn Buruma selling shops became a thing in Japan due to the very demand. But to see such a person write a comment, not in the lines of admitting their immoral taste with a certain sense of shame, in the lines of, I know that the idea of fetishizing about almost underwear-like garment worn by minors, wanting to touch it, smell it, and do all kinds of other activities with it is wrong, but it is still my inclinations. But no. Just like the CG producer of the Pecan show, absolutely no sense of guilt or shame whatsoever, just a complete emotionless repetitive statement of, I like it, it's just for fun, it's fun, what's the problem? And I'm not sure if this commenter had multiple accounts and were liking his own comments or something, but in the span of the few minutes from when the comment was published to when I spotted the comment for the first time, the comment already had likes. And the problem is, when you see such people who spew BS with utmost sense of conviction and have other people seemingly sympathize with the BS, as in the other staffs of the Pecan show who are already done being brainwashed by the CG producer after working together with him for multiple decades, and thus laughed along and found no problem with the atrocity of a quote-unquote joke that subsequently made the entire nation enraged. I see all the likes on the quote-unquote what's the problem of wearing unwashed, already worn undergarment by minors, smelling it and do quote-unquote other stuff with it comment, written with most resolute conviction, adamantly claiming that there is not a single tiny bit wrong with their line of thinking. It really does mess with your mind, even if it's only for half a second, and your moral framework that determines what is right and wrong. But thankfully for us, we can just delete and block the hell out of such perverted psychopaths, move on and never hear from them again. But once again, for all staffs working at the Pecan show, this was not an option. And if you have to work with amoral beings, such as a CG producer for multiple hours a day, for multiple decades, day after day seeing these out-of-line inhumane jokes created by him during the rehearsal phase before the show, and him gaslighting you every single day that this is funny and that you're a Karen if you get offended by it, then just like how Jordan Belfort, who was initially faithful to his wife, gradually became a degenerate in the Wall Street atmosphere, you slowly, again this is a gradual process, slowly but surely turn into a degenerate, just like the CG producer, becoming one of the many staffs who laughed along with him and found no problem with the quote-unquote joke. Now, the only reason why this abomination of a quote-unquote joke was actually aired on August 4th was due to the fact that the timekeeper of the show on the day was a new recruit and made a mistake in terms of clicking the wrong button and showing the teleprompter screen that was to be shown only during the rehearsal and not the actual live show. And this means that for years and years and years, the CG producer of the Pecan show, during his time working for the broadcast company for 32 years, probably made similar absolute mockeries of the viewers and weaker members of society for the rehearsal stage teleprompt. We estimate at least in the number of the hundreds range, based on his multiple decades of time working for the broadcasting company. It's just that they were never revealed to the outside world due to the previous experienced timekeepers not making any mistakes prior to August 4th, 2011. Then did nobody correct this amoral CG producer over the years for his out-of-line quote-unquote jokes? Absolutely not. Many people did correct him more than often over the years. But just like you saw from the interview, he gives his yeah, whatever response to whoever rebukes him, then goes on to do the exact same thing the next day. I mean, if he has the audacity to pull off the quote-unquote, "It's just a prank, bro, why are people such a bunch of Karens?" to the millions, literally millions of upset Japanese people who are watching the special quote-unquote apology program aired by Tokai TV, then do you actually believe that any staff from the Pecan show could have impacted his way of thinking, making him understand that he's a psychopath and that he has to stop? Absolutely not. In fact, this is exactly what happened on August 3rd, the day before the whole thing was aired on live television. A brave female staff took the courage to directly go up to the CG producer in person and tell him that what he has done here is highly egregious and that he has to stop this and fix it immediately. The CG producer's response, to quote his exact words, a mocking "hi hi hi hi," which can be roughly translated as "F off you girl staff, you're too dumb to get my joke." And needless to say, the CG producer never changed the teleprompter screen, with no other staff other than the previous female staff commenting on the matter until the show was aired live, and the rest is history. If amoral beings such as the CG producer are teachers, these are the ones that, when victims of the infamous Japanese way of bullying, that is easy may confide to the teacher that he or she is being bullied and needs desperate help. Tell them with the most emotionless blank face, maybe you're the one who acted out of line, thus got bullied. And as I've mentioned previously, what differentiates these amoral beings are their unwavering consistency, the repetition after repetition after repetition of the exact same statement. So when the student hears from his or her own teacher of the exact same line for the 100th time, maybe you acted out of line, thus you got bullied. Maybe you acted out of line, thus you got bullied. Maybe you acted out of line, thus the reason you got bullied. Being stated with the utmost conviction from the teacher's part every single time, then the bully victims gradually do begin to think that, hey, maybe it is my fault that I get bullied. I deserve to get beaten up and get my skin burnt every day by my classmates. If amoral beings such as the CG producer or your boss at work, the same scenario applies. Unlike what many sensational content regarding Japan wants you to think, not every Japanese husband wants to cheat on their wife and believe that it is perfectly fine. Then when you're working overtime, the amoral senior comes at you every damn day in the time ranges between 9 to 11 p.m. tell you that sleeping with a professional sex worker is not cheating on your wife. Again, the most marked aspect about them are their conviction and their repetition and repetition of the analogous statement that almost becomes hypnotic, especially if you're already mentally fatigued and enervated. Every night for months, hey, let's go to this quote-unquote establishment. Sleeping with a professional sex worker is not cheating on your wife. Sleeping with a professional S worker is not cheating on your wife. Sleeping with a professional S worker is not cheating on your wife. You get the picture. This handful of minority amoral psychopaths in the Japanese society, especially put into a position of degree of power and influence, spread their moral ideas as the norm, repeat and repeat and repeat the same message with the most unshakable conviction, which gradually but most successfully gaslights and conditions the previously upright individuals around them and slowly erode their moral compass. I refuse to believe that every single Japanese soldier who came to South Korea during World War II happily and voluntarily assaulted and permanently destroyed both the body and the minds of 200,000 Korean women while they were crying for help, begging them to let them return back home to their husbands. If that was indeed the case, I lose utterly all hope for Japan and the humanity at large. What I wish to believe has happened in history, as can be witnessed in the large number of Japanese organizational settings, whether it be a broadcasting channel, school, mid-sized company, or of course in this case the army, is that this handful of amoral senior high-ranking soldiers time and time again told the initially upright soldiers who refused to commit such heinous acts, "It's no big deal, it's just for fun, while the other guys are doing it. It's no big deal, it's just for fun, while the other guys are doing it." And slowly but surely, the initially pure soldiers still with a set of conscience become gaslighted by the brainwashing of these minority immoral beings and slowly begin to think in the lines of, look at him, not feeling any guilt, not changing his mind for even a single second of the single day. Only a right person can have such a strong sense of conviction about an idea. Maybe he is right. And again, as much as the Japanese textbooks just blindly try to erase it, or as the ignorant Japanese right-wingers like to always say, claiming that every single one of the 200,000 Korean women, ones who had husbands and their loved ones, were all quote-unquote asking for it, the rest is history. I mean, I say history, but this in fact happened still not even 100 years ago, and the records will never be effaced. By the way, I have actual elder female family members in South Korea who were alive when all of this was conducted by the Japanese soldiers. So as we do tend to get the one weirdo in the comment section, If that weirdo writes a comment legitimizing and quote-unquote logically justifying R, or claimed all 200,000 Korean women voluntarily walked into the beds of the Japanese soldiers and were quote-unquote asking for it, God, the things that are actually said by the Japanese nationalists sounds even more stupid if you actually repeat them out loud. That commenter is just going to get a block and a delete, period. Now, we left out this part for last, and that is, what kind of punishment did the CG producer of the Pecan show receive? Surely, he had to at least resign, right? Especially after the extremely insincere, non-apologetical interview which was provided to him as his last chance. Well, the results will surprise you. The CG producer got a 50% deduction in his wages for 3 months and a 5-day ban from work. I repeat, a 5-day ban from work. That was it. This is exactly why we left this discussion for last. Japan does not properly punish amorality. In fact, it is even questionable whether they punish it at all. A senior at a company who continues to encourage his kohais to cheat on their wives and take them to certain quote-unquote establishments does not get fired, let alone reprimanded. Unlike the Germans who constantly and transparently remind themselves that what they have committed during World War II was egregious and should never be repeated, the Japanese take the very opposite approach, as seen by Abe, who quite literally went to pay tribute to the war criminals on a consistent basis. And under such a societal atmosphere, where immoral beings are left unpunished, with everyone knowing that immorality goes unpunished, the young and aspiring new generation of immoral psychopaths emerge in Japan, receiving the torch that has been passed down. Look at this kid from Saitama who uploaded an Instagram story deliberately on March 11th, 2023, the day when the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami occurred, laughing hysterically at the victims who died during the biggest natural disaster in recorded Japanese history. He actually uses the word semen, yes, actual semen, in order to take the absolute mockery out of the dead. And this kid supposedly attends one of the elite high schools in Japan, meaning that he's likely to attend an elite university under Japan's elevator system, get an elite job, and eventually reach a position of influence. If he's to become a teacher, then this is the exact type of immoral being who will laugh at the faces of the bully victims and tell them they deserved it. I mean, look at him laughing his face off at the dead. And what if he becomes a senior at your company? And what if he becomes a high-ranking soldier during times of war? We believe you guys already know the answer. Alright guys, that's it for tonight. Today's video was a bit on the darker side, but we believe for the right cause. Emil Choran, in the Disintegration title section of his work on the heights of despair, said, to quote, "There are only 2 fundamental attitudes, the naive and the heroic. One must choose between them to avoid idiocy, but for the man who has come to make such a choice, innocence is no longer an option, so there remains only heroism." End quote. And if you're watching this video right now, it means that you're at this very stage of choice in regards to your attitude towards Japan or your attitude towards the world in general. And you can of course choose the naivete route, covering your eyes and saying that everything in Japan is perfectly fine with absolutely no problem. But as Choran said, if you're at the stage where you have to make such a choice in the first place, innocence or staying naive is already not an option. So the choice is either idiocy, being that idiot who tries to ignore all the problems that requires fixing and shout that everything is happy-go-merry, or follow the only other option, which is heroism. Admit that not everything in Japan, or again the world in general, are all sunshines and rainbows, and be that hero doesn't mean that you have to be Batman or anything of that nature, but be that person who tries to make things right despite the bad, regardless of the scale of influence that you may have. And we firmly believe that this video has chosen the latter attitude of Choran's 2 fundamental attitudes. So with that said, always appreciate you guys for watching, and if you have not already, please subscribe to our channel and check out our book, and we'll see you on the next episode of Age Analysis.